Good evening. My name is Thurman Greco, and the name of this program is Let's Live, and it's coming to you from Channel 23, Educational Television in Woodstock, New York. And we have a very special guest tonight. And she comes in a category we have never had guests in this category before. So that makes Janine Mower very, very special indeed. Janine, can you tell us first of all, how did you find Woodstock?
Well, so it's an interesting story. My mom came here when she was about 8 years old. So she grew up here, let's say. And my dad's from Kingston. So they met in high school. Then, long story short, I came here when I was 2 years old. So I was born in Fresno, California, though. So I always tell everybody I'm just a local, not a native. So I can't claim that native status like John can. John's a native, but I'm not. My kids are natives, but I'm not. So.
And how did you find an interest in the history of Woodstock? What sparked this for you?
Well, I think, to be honest with you, I come at it from a genealogy perspective, if you will. And when I was 12, I sort of got the bug of researching my mother's family in Maine. And I've been at it ever since. And so once you start doing genealogy, you then, at least I did, became interested in everyday life of people that you're researching. I wanted them to be more than their birth dates and their death dates and their marriage dates and when they got baptized. So that's when I started, if you will, digging a little bit deeper into the census records and the church records, and suddenly a narrative develops. So that's how I started that.
So when did you write your first book?
The first book that I was ever really involved in was in 1998-ish, when I wrote the story of my dad's family. It's a story of the Irish that came to Ulster County, Kingston, New York, 1855. And I actually developed the idea of writing a history, brief I call it, the brief history of Ireland, if you can do such a thing. And I wanted it to be so that someone could pick it up and read it that was not really interested in digging deep into history, like the kind of books that our friend Alf Evers writes. You got to really want to read history. So this is a good overview. I put that together, included Dad's genealogy, history of Kingston, and that was my first self-published work.
How many pages?
Couldn't tell you, because I didn't know how to number the pages. That's an honest answer, right?
That's great.
I didn't know you had to do that. So.
You know, that's really interesting because when I started going to writing classes, there was a lot of emphasis on how many thousand words and how many pages and blah, blah, blah. And then we get out into the world and I start asking writers, well, how many? Nobody knows. Okay. Right. Nobody knows how many words. What writer is going to count the words, you know?
I think that frame of reference or that mindset comes from an editor's point of view, or it comes from a publisher's point of view, because they know the size of the book that they want. They know how a book will fit. This is what I've learned since 1998, how a book will fit on a shelf, which to me is not why I'm writing a book, but they're in the business of selling a book, so they have to know the size of the pages and all that stuff that really isn't important to me. But
right, it's all about selling the product, and you are so correct. It's all about what it's going to look like on the shelf, and how is a person going to use it when they get it home, and what's going to motivate them to buy it. And we're just interested in the story, word by word.
That's the thing. It's interesting what motivates a person to buy a local history book, because I think it's better if you have the opportunity to have the conversation with the author. That is a good way for the person to realize that, geez, maybe there's more to this than a fancy cover. And then they know where the author came from when they were writing it, what motivated them to write the book, what's the heart of the book. So that, I think, talking to an author is a good way to get interested in a book. And, you know, you can't do that because authors don't hang out in bookstores all the time. So it makes it a little difficult.
Right. And when do you display your books at Mowers Meadow?
I do. I have, I'm specializing in local history. So what I do at my booth at the flea market is I feature the books that I've authored. I feature Richard Hebner's books. He's done a few. I feature books that are about Kingston, and I have a couple about Saugerties. And so I like to be able to represent the small areas, let's say a 12-mile radius from Woodstock.
Have you, do you have a following for that? In other words, do people come to you and ask you questions about Kingston and Woodstock history?
It's starting to, in the past 2 years, I would say that there's more questions about town, because there's more new people in town that are interested, sincerely interested in, they've bought their new homes, they're here, they want to learn. So that's just starting to come along, but most of it's pretty random. I don't think a person comes to our flea market and expects to find a local history author there. So it's a surprise.
Well, and they have people, that of course brings up another question, is why do you suppose people come to the flea market?
Well, you could say, why do people come to Woodstock? That's a bigger question. Why do you think people come to Woodstock?
Clueless.
Well, I think it's when I was on the library board, I learned something from a DJ who was our librarian at the time, that Woodstock is a state of mind. And I believe that carries through. People are looking for something, they're not quite sure what they're looking for. So when they want to have a day trip, or they are coming through the Mid-Hudson Valley, they want to do something, they come through to get that Woodstock vibe. People are also coming to learn about the music and learn about the art. We have a great history of great American art by great American artists living in Woodstock. There's my tagline, if you will. And so people come for that reason, and the flea market is part of that activity. I mean, you could the people literally spend the whole day doing the whole circuit in town, and we're part of that.
I believe so. And I also, one of the things that has happened to me is the first year that I had a booth at the flea market, there were no books. And now there are so many books.
Yes. And when you did your author fair, which I hope you can do in 2022, if we don't do it in the fall of this year, that was a great opportunity for local authors like myself who struggle, which is the right word, struggle with getting your works out. And that was a good opportunity for people to do a reading and to be able to sell their books and talk about their books. So thank you for doing that.
Well, I think that's very important, because Woodstock, and I don't think Woodstock is really that different from the rest of the world, mm-hmm. is filled with writers. Mm-hmm. And you just wonder, how did they learn? How did you learn to write?
Well, I think for me, my writing comes from reading. I was a bookworm as a child, and I still could do that. If life allowed me to sit and curl up and read, I would do that. So I think when you have a natural inclination to read, then you become curious about writing. And also, I think writing gives a person an opportunity to say things that they might not be comfortable speaking. So you could probably say there's not many people that feel comfortable sitting here chit-chatting in front of a camera, knowing they're going out into the world. But they might be comfortable sitting down and writing an essay about their thoughts. So that gives a voice to maybe the person who's less inclined to speak publicly.
Yes.
So then I took off from there. But I think it's also, I have been blessed with the gift of, so let me just tell you for an example. In 1998-ish, I was very involved in the Historical Society, a lot going on. And that was sort of a transition period, if you will. And there were people that had been born in the late 1890s that were getting older, and we were interviewing them, we were talking with them, I was visiting them in their homes, and I had the privilege of being able to look at their family albums. All right, take Nelson Schultes, for example, from Wittenberg. He and his wife, they had a lot to say. They had a legacy that they wanted to make sure was remembered. And there were other people too. I just mentioned them. And so I felt driven, if you will. That's how this got put together. I was a vehicle for that energy, that they had something they wanted to show and say. I contacted the publisher. I gave them examples of my writing. I showed them examples of the pictures that were in people's families' albums, and we put it all together, and it became this book that was 20 years ago that this was done. And it preserves the recollections of the Schultes family, if you will, the Reynolds family, Van de Bogarts, Ole Scherson, Bruce Reynolds, the Stoutenbergs, just to name a few, Sandra Sickler Schultes. They're the things that were important to them. I was the vehicle to put that in here. And it was a privilege to be able to do things like that and help preserve the stories that they're not here to tell anymore. But their stories are preserved. And that's a good thing. I enjoyed it.
How many such books did you write?
So I've been involved in 2 of those. It's the Images of Woodstock, and they call it Woodstock Revisited. So this is sort of my beat up copy. But in that particular book, I went a little bit deeper into the life of Woodstock. So I would tell you about the fire company, parades, politics, picnics, Cub Scouts, all the different things that go on in a small town. So they are represented there. There are a lot of things that don't happen anymore because of the way populations have changed and things like that. And then I was happy to be able to collaborate with our town historian, Richard Hepner, on this one. So we have 3 books by Arcadia Publishing. This is Legendary Locals, which was fun to put together. And Richard and I we had a challenge to designate 100 people that had passed away as legendary, because as we all know, if people are alive and you don't pick them, they're going to all fight about it. So Richard and I said, we're going to just make sure everybody's passed away, and then we're going to make them legendary. So that was a good work to put together. So we had fun together doing that. So hopefully we can do another one. There's enough now, we can do another one.
Really?
Yeah, we did that one in 2013. We probably had 50 people we didn't use because they have a limit to how much you can, because of the size of the book that goes on the bookshelf.
Right.
So I'm sure we could do another one in a few years.
And what are you working on now?
Well, so in 2016, I wrote, I self-published, which is a real trip. You know, you've done that. So I self-published a biography of my dad, and finished that, put that together, his early years in Kingston. And now I have the experience of, he has put together a memoir, if you will, about his World War II stories. So he put that together before he died, and then I said, well, that has to become some sort of a self-published book. So right now I'm working on trying to develop a format that will make that interesting. And it's actually going to turn out to be a little his memoir and a little bit of my memoir. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah. Will there be a lot of photographs and things in it?
No. You know, it's I haven't figured out a way to really truly do that in a way that the pictures would look good in a self-published work. I'm open to checking it out, but I don't anticipate to get this quality that you have in a book like this with pictures. That's what I would like. So I'm a little gun shy of trying to do a self-published work with pictures in it. So it'll be more interesting text.
Well, and each book is its own journey.
True.
You know, I know that. How long does it take you to do a book?
Well, each of these probably took a year. By the time you go around and you interview your subjects, you do your research, you know, I would say a year, at least a year on each one to get it right. You know, I didn't bring tonight, but I did write the biography of my husband's family, the Mowers of Maple Lane. And that was more than a year, and that was deeply researched because that you wanted to get particularly right. Again, it was another history of the Palatine immigration group that came to the Mid-Hudson Valley in 1710 And I wanted to make sure that that was accurate. And that's a deeper history. So, not that the Irish weren't deep too, but that was more complicated.
Right, and it goes back a few more years.
Yes, couple more years.
Couple more years.
Yeah.
It does make a difference. Well, your first book, how long did that one take?
So to do the Fallon book, that was probably, we started researching the family history in 1985. So that's 10 years in the making.
Yes.
When you're putting that together. But I think the thing, and you know this as an author yourself, once you get in the groove, when you know what you're going to do with the project, then it all just flows. And then it goes really smoothly. It's like writing a song or writing a poem. Once the groove happens,
Yes.
yeah, you're on the right track, as they say.
But it's sometimes, I think, when I talk to people about writing, the first book always takes so long.
Well, sometimes you don't know you have a book in you sometimes.
Right.
You know, that's the thing. Now, I did this one, I want to share this. I was involved in this book. This is an out-of-print book in 2004 with Eric Knudsen. It was the history of the golf club, and sadly, it's out of print. But we put this together in 6 months, maybe 8 months, roughly, not counting the time that it had. It was printed, and this is high quality printing. It's a great book. There is one in the library if you want to go, and you can do it as a research item and look at it. But you learn about the town of Woodstock through the history of a place. It's fascinating. Fascinating.
And what was who was the force behind that one?
The club or the book?
Yeah,
Well, the force behind it was the club.
they wanted their book.
Yes, they were celebrating their anniversary. It's 75 years, I think it was, 1929 to 2004. So they were going to have a big to-do, if you will, to celebrate that. So Eric was a lifelong member of the Woodstock Country Club, and he knew a lot of the history already. So I was the helper of digging into the history before the country club, and then helped, guide him a little bit. But it was fun. It was a good project.
And so now, is somebody working on the next one?
For these guys?
Yes.
No, I wish they would just reprint this one. But I don't know if they'll do that. But
Well, now, what is this one?
this book is Gene Gady's. Have you ever had an opportunity to see that?
No.
So sadly, another out-of-print book. So it's called Woodstock Gatherings, Apple Bites, and Ashes. And there is a copy in the library also for research. And I think we have one at the Historical Society that you could sit there and look at it too if you wanted to. But here's the funny thing about this book. It has no index. And Gene did that on purpose. So you really don't know what's in this book. Look. So what have I done? I've kind of earmarked everything in here, and I'm in the process of creating my own index. But what Jean did was she pretty much told the story of her life. She grew up on Cooper Lake Road. She's of the Lasher family in Cooper Lake, which is also they're part of the Palatines. And she separated this out into the little hamlet areas that she lived in or that she knew about. And she had people assist her by sending in recipes. And she also did, see, this is the part that, this is a self-published work. See, it's all black and white. And so sometimes the photos come up good and sometimes they don't. If I could be guaranteed a good photo like that, I would put pictures in my books, black and white. But so she's got recipes, she's got pictures, she's got her recollections, she has other people's memories of town. So it's a wonderful, wonderful piece written by somebody who grew up in Woodstock, loved Woodstock deeply. And it shows in this doorstop, but it's an important doorstop, definitely. I wouldn't be without it, and I wish every home could have one, but there are no more.
We have so many new people coming to town now. What kind of questions do they ask?
Good question. They don't ask where the festival was, that's for sure. They don't, because they don't want to know about that. Certain people will ask, what's the story with
music in Woodstock. That seems to be on people's minds. They will relate that to the Woodstock Festival. And it's just general little questions. It's hard to say exactly what they ask. It's sort of random stuff. Did you grow up here? What was it like growing up here? Oh, it must have been fantastic. That kind of thing. Or they'll say to John, you grew up on this property? Yeah. Oh my God, where was the house? Because the house isn't there, So we explain how it was a farmhouse with a farm lot and things like that. So little things like that. Just getting familiar with the idea that Woodstock was a country town, if you will, a small village. It's hard to grasp that when you look at it now.
When you meet these people,
Mm-hmm.
and of course you meet, I'm going to make an assumption, which is probably wrong, but I'm going to assume that you meet the majority of them in the flea market, because that's where all the people come to. But that may not be true.
Oh, we meet people everywhere you go. If you're out at a restaurant, you meet people that are either, there's three ways it runs at a restaurant. Let's say if you're sitting at a bar and you're having a cocktail or you're having appetizers and people are there, they're either visitors who come once a year and they have a regular routine where they come back and they visit. They're people that have come here for the first time and they're curious about Woodstock, or they're here and they're sure they're going to move here and they want to share their enthusiasm about moving here. So there's three options that I can think of that we run across. So it's not just at the flea market. We stumble upon people in all different places.
In all different places.
I mean, sometimes people will come to the Historical Society if we're there working, or if I haven't done a shift in a while on the weekends when we're open, but sometimes people will come and they're curious, and you can tell that their wheels are turning about, how could I make this happen? I think I'd like to live here. Yeah, different places.
So people come and they start talking to you and they're very excited about Woodstock.
Absolutely.
What is it about Woodstock that excites them?
I think I should ask them. That's a good question. I should ask them that. Well, I think from my perspective, what I think draws people here is that we have a close proximity to the metropolitan area. So you can maintain your work, but you can live up here. And then the second piece is that people want to disconnect completely and they want to come up here and they want to start anew.
Something
I should
different.
ask that question. Thank you for putting that in my head.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I'm curious about how, because when I first came here, one of the things that impressed me about Woodstock was that half of the people are weekend people. We had 8,000 or 9,000 people, and the first 5,000 were weekenders. So I'm curious to know, of the new people that have come into our community, how many of them are still weekenders and how many of them are with us all week long.
Sadly, I couldn't tell you.
Right, I can't either.
I have stopped paying attention to those statistics for some reason.
Well, I think it's too soon now to get the new statistics.
Yeah.
I think,
Well, the 2020s are coming out soon, I guess, right?
but things have
Yeah.
changed so much.
I
since
think,
2020.
yeah, I think it's hard to say. It's hard to say. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I have not a clue. And of
Yeah.
course, in the summer, and the people are going through the market, you can tell who are the tourists and who are the whatevers, because there are a lot of local people who spend every Saturday there.
Well, I have to tell you, we had a funny experience on Friday.
Oh, did we
This is
really?
totally random, but my daughter and her family and I decided we were going to go for lunch to the Little Apple. And we left the flea market field where we had parked, and we came walking up through House parking lot. And there was a gentleman in the House parking lot, and he said, "Oh, are you new in town? I'd love to be your tour guide." And we all busted out, and we're like, "No, that's okay. We got it. Thank you very much." And we walked up out of earshot, and we go, "Oh my goodness, do we look like tourists?" But we must have. So
That's
you just never
interesting.
know who's a tourist now, you see, and you never know who's a local.
That's true. That's very true.
We're living proof of it.
I think for me, I put people in the category of local if I see them every week. If I keep, because there are clients that come to the flea market, and that's something that they do, and you see them every week. So I figure, well, if you have to come 200 miles, you're not going to come every Saturday.
Right,
You know.
unless you have a house somewhere.
Right.
Yeah. But don't forget, there's a lot of folks that come into Woodstock that have their weekend homes in Greene County. Or because I hear
Yes.
that, then they have their weekend homes in Phoenicia, or they're out in Olive Bridge or somewhere.
Yes.
So it's not just that the impact of second home life in
Well, are
Woodstock
there
proper.
families in Saugerties now? All of those,
Sure.
there, a lot of new families. And somebody said Kingston's totally full.
Well, so I just had a funny thought. I know we're being spontaneous, so I'm going to share this funny thought with you. So I grew up in town, as I mentioned. I wasn't born here, but I had the great honor of being able to hang around town when I was 14, 15, 16, 17. We were happy to spend our summer nights on the village green in front of the Cafe Espresso. We'd go to, sneak into Deanie's, go to the Village Jug. And so that's 1968, 69, 70-ish. There were people coming to town then, and they were from everywhere, the whole entire world. And what a heck of a lot of fun that was. So I kind of grew up with it. I grew up with the weekends being busy. I worked at the Playhouse. That was important. That was a weekend Friday night gig that we had, or Saturday night. Us teenage girls would be all dressed up, and we'd be the usherettes and take the tickets and hand out the programs for the show. And it was pretty fantastic way to grow up, and I have some wonderful memories of the excitement, the vibrancy that people that are traveling bring into town. Everybody went to Deanie's afterwards. Sorry about that. The hubbub of going to Deanie's, the theater that would get out, and then we'd all rush up to Deanie's to have banana cream pie, and everybody would be there having their after theater dinner. What a great thing. What a great way to grow up. And that's still going on in town. So for me, it's just, it's a continuation of the same of what I grew up with. It's not something new. Well, how do you think about that?
That is really, really nice.
Right? It's different, right?
Because that's what I'm seeing now. And what I'm seeing now, when I think about the families that are coming, I'm thinking the ones with children are the ones that are going to stay. Mm-hmm. And the children are going to have the most wonderful life. Sure, and the schools are good.
Yes.
What
well, there's
more
many
could you ask
generations.
for?
There's many generations of people that have come to Woodstock and had brought their children, have been brought up here and have great memories. I mean, we can hear that at the flea market, where kids will, teenagers will come by or they'll be in their 20s and they'll say, oh, my parents brought me here every weekend and I really look forward to it. So they weren't just coming to the flea market, they're coming in to do the whole circuit around town of all the shops, and they have great memories of it. So that's a cool thing.
Yeah.
So there's why people come to Woodstock. It's a repeat visit. It's a repeat experience of having a good time, relaxing, vacationing. Most people are vacationing, and most of them are having a good time when they're vacationing.
Well, I'm hoping that the families who bring the children will stay, because this is a great way to grow up.
Sure.
And since my very first year here, I was taking Spanish classes, and we picked up in our Spanish classes some children, who were living with their grandparents and going to Ontiara, wherever Ontiara High School was, and they were coming to the Spanish classes, to kind of help with their Spanish.
Oh, yeah.
Which was interesting, because they were going back home to Spanish.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah, right. Well, it's you learn it by speaking it, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
that's the best way to learn. Now you're thinking of children.
Well, I am thinking of families with children.
I wanted to share this with you. Have you read this book ever?
No, I have not.
Well, so this is written from the perspective of a child.
Whoa. Okay.
So it's Vanishing Village, and it's one of my favorite books, and it's written by Will Rose, who grew up in the center of town and he writes it from the perspective of 10 years old. And it's called Vanishing Village, and his village did vanish, is gone. What he experienced
Is gone.
is totally bye-bye. And it is a sweet book, and he chronicles daily life, which is what I like about it. And he talks about, one of my most recent ones that I've read is his essay about The Undertaker, because I was doing some research on lashers, and my dear friend Ken Peterson, who passed away, Will Rose has an essay about the lashers in here. And so it's fantastic. I highly recommend it. The library has a copy of it. The Historical Society has some for sale.
Oh, really?
Stop by. What else did I want to say about this? I hope that what the Historical Society, what we're kind of daydreaming about, is being able to, we have a person that's on our board who does voiceovers, Louis Arlt. I'm committing you to this now, Louis, so this is it. We're going public. But we're hoping that we can match pictures that we have in the Historical Society collection with Louis narrating Will Rose's text, and sort of give a different kind of visual life to his words. Because this is all, there's no pictures. This is a reading book. So that's what we're hoping to do, and hopefully we'll be able to get that launched maybe in 2022, which is next year. But great book, highly recommend it.
And can you tell me more about the Historical Society? You're the first person that's come here sitting at this table that's even mentioned it.
Well, so the Historical Society was founded, oddly enough, the same year the Country Club was founded, 1929. And I can tell you from the little bit of research that I've done over the 30-odd or more years that I've been playing around with history, the mid-1920s in Woodstock was sort of a time where there was a lot of energy to bring things together in Woodstock. And it was fueled somewhat by the people from Birdcliff, but it was also fueled by prominent business people. It was fueled by people that were interested in the country club. So there was this synergy going on. And part of that synergy included the creation of the Historical Society of Woodstock, 1929. So we're, what are we? We're member-supported, volunteer-managed, year-round. It's a year-round process of keeping things going, and we open in the summer. The museum is at 20 Como Drive, which is the Ames House. And
So if a person wants to find out more about Woodstock, and they have heard about the Historical Society, when is it open? When can they go? How much does it cost to get inside? Who can join?
Right. So anybody can join, and there is no admission fee to come to the museum. It's open on weekends 1 to 5. The show that we have up right now is called Seasons: Catching Nature's Cycle, and it's a collection of art that was put together by Letitia Smith and Susanna Laval. It's a very small part of the collected works that the Historical Society is proud to be a good steward of, and the theme is Woodstock landscapes in the different seasons. I think I got that all right. The Historical Society website is historicalsocietyofwoodstock.org, and it's 845-679-2256 is the phone number. Somebody will get back to you at some point. But so it's open on weekends, but the research, if you wanted to do research, let's say you wanted to research something, you would make an appointment to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking.
If you want to come buy this book, you could do it on the weekends.
Okay.
Or you could leave a message and say, hey, somebody, I want to stop by when you're not open, and then one of us would get back to you and say, okay, we'll meet you.
I'm also imagining a person, a new resident, who is going to someday while walking to house or whatever is going to begin to ask some questions. And that would be a good place to start the answers.
It could be, sure.
You know, that's what I'm imagining.
Or you can come to me at the flea market. You know, I mean, I'm sort of accessible. That's the challenge that we face. The Historical Society is accessible 1 to 5. And the docent that's there might not be able to answer your questions, but they'll get us in touch with somebody who can answer your questions. That's kind of what we all do. If we don't know the answer, we refer, or we don't refer you. I'm going to take your name and phone number, and I'm going to find the person that can answer your question and have them get back to you. But yeah.
Because one of the things that's so interesting to me about Woodstock is the fact that it has a certain look. Woodstock has it has an origin which is reflected in the current day. And if you're coming here, and even if you didn't think about it when you bought your house, which I certainly didn't when we bought our house, you're going to have some questions. And I think that's a good place to start.
Well, so it is, sometimes I feel like it's one of the number one questions that people want to call up and say, what can you tell me about the history of my house? And sadly, there isn't always much to say about somebody's house. We have a wonderful part of our archive is something that was done by the Junior League in the 1960s, where they went and took pictures of the majority of the houses in town. But that's pretty much all they did. So that's a tricky thing to research, your house. It's tricky. There are people that are very successful at doing that on their own, and there is a couple of old stone houses that there are a few people that are just like amazingly, nothing deters them as far as researching old stone houses, and it's not me. But I can put you in touch with those folks.
Well, I'm
They
not
know
even
they
thinking.
know how to read. The trick with doing your this is it's sort of off topic, but when I say I wanted to research, let's just say the Maple Lane property where we work, we have to read deeds. We have to know who sold to who, what the lot lines are, what the years are, and that's how you research your house. And that's a lot of work.
It is.
Yeah. But it can be rewarding. It can be interesting.
But I'm not even thinking about the stone houses. I'm just thinking about some of the old houses. You know, the place that we're at has some real interesting steps along the way. And
Can you tell me what a couple of them are?
well, first of all, I think it was a shed that finally ended up with the house. And the bathroom was added later. And the kitchen was not really real, you know, it was just there. And the foundation, I don't know who did the foundation, but one corner of the foundation was held up by a car jack. And so, you know, there's these kinds of things which are so fascinating. And we thought there are 3 houses that are all connected with the same water pipes. But now that my neighbor finally sold her house, and the woman who bought the house, she's finding out there are 6 houses connected to the water pipes.
Don't you just wish Bill Heckeroth was still alive? Do you know Bill Heckeroth?
Yeah.
Adolf Heckeroth. They probably put that plumbing in.
Well, and then of course we have the sewer system.
Right, you're on
So,
the
you know,
system, right,
and
yeah.
then you go up around Tannery Brook, and there's a collection of 4 houses that have been for sale for a while. And I feel like, for me, those 4 houses probably all belong to one family. And maybe they came there in the summertime, because they were little houses, you know. So now we have people who've come up from the city, and I'm seeing the people who are working in the house is probably guys, of course. It's a perfect opportunity for men to work on a house. And here are these 4 houses, these jewels, you know. And so I see the stories that are connected to.
Yeah, I mean, the area around Pine Grove Street was called the Pine Grove.
Yeah.
You're familiar with that, you know, and there were church picnics down there. So And then eventually people started building houses. I think they were in the 30s when the houses started going in down there. So, but that's it. It's hard to research a house unless you have, I'm thinking right now I can see at the Historical Society a picture of, taken from the Legion, and it looks across Waterfall Way, if you will, and it catches the one house on Tannery Brook Road that is the oldest house on the road. It's the one that's on the corner of House's parking lot. That's the 4 little buildings that probably
Yes.
are, yes. So that house is clearly there, and it's a beautiful view. You can see the church steeple in the background. You can see the Brinkerhoff House or the Woodstock Valley Inn in the background, so we know it's before that fire, which was in 1929, 1930. So that's another good way to research your house, is to be able to find someone who's got pictures of it. That makes it a lot easier.
So in my mind, there are people coming to this town, and some of them, maybe not many, but some of them are going to have some questions
Sure.
about what they got.
Sure.
You
Right.
know.
Well, their realtor should help them with that too before they buy.
Well,
Sorry.
right. Right now, you buy
Right.
in an instant, and after you get it,
Then you wonder, right?
yeah, and your life savings have gone, here, and you're thinking, what have I got?
Right. Well,
Because it all went so fast.
you've got a house in a little town that has a lot of deep history. Let me mention one of my other favorite books here. I don't mean to disrespect Alf, but Alf is the premier town historian. He wrote 2 wonderful books about Woodstock and Catskills. He wrote, with the assistance of Ed Sanders, he wrote an amazing book about Kingston. But this is if you're buying a house in Woodstock, you should have this. And I think you can still get it at the Golden Notebook. But it's a piece that I use regularly for research. You can't sit down and read the whole thing, but you read it a little bit at a time, and then you underline it. Thankfully, it has an index, which Jean didn't do, but Alf did, thank God. But Alf was involved in this little book, The Story of a Small Town Library, written by Francis Rogers, who was the librarian forever before DJ was the librarian. But hidden in the lines of this little book, of the story of the library, is the story of Woodstock at the time of the 1920s, right? Who knew? 30s, 40s. Fascinating little read. Another book everybody should have, right?
Yes.
You won't learn about your house in there, but you'll learn about the library and you'll learn about the town. Yes.
I
recommend
think
that.
if you're coming to the town and you're going to live here, then
Yeah, and
these
there's
are-
lots of ways to learn it. And the Woodstock Library, interestingly about this, when I think I really read this book when I was serving on the library board, so that's like 2007-ish. I think I did 3 or 4 years on the library board. And we had our ups and downs on the library board when I was there. These guys had their ups and downs on the library board. So it just seems to be the nature of serving on boards locally. Everybody has their ups and downs, and it's all well written in there. But it's fascinating. Everybody came from a place of passion, and you can't ask for more than that when you're involved in something passionate. It was amazing. You should read that. You'd love it.
Oh, I'm sure I would.
Yeah.
Now, what about this one?
Well, this is another little gem. This is Anita Smith's Woodstock History and Hearsay. All right, this is sort of an original book. It was printed in 1959. She was a great interviewer. Anita was. She actually, before. So I said that I was honored to be able to work with Nelson Schultes and his family and other families and get their stories. Well, Anita was a generation before me, and she was able to talk with people in the 20s, 30s that had memories that early and record them in here. She also did an amazing job of putting in folk tales that people had talked about. She also did World War II history of people that served in World War II. So this is a treasure of a book. We do have, at the Historical Society, there's a reprint of this that you can pick up there at the Historical Society. Weston and Julia Blelock modernized this, and so That's another good piece to take if you want to learn about the everyday life of people in Woodstock. I highly recommend that. So I want to show you one other piece before we go on to the modern times. How are we doing for time? We're doing all right?
I don't pay any attention to the time.
Cool. So
that's Ellen's job.
We talked earlier, Thurman and I, about writing. Okay. And how did I get started writing? And I said reading. So then I went on to do all these little projects that I've worked on. But I do research, and when you do research about local history, you find the gems about any town that you're researching, or any country, or any family, or any whatever, in the most amazingly strange places. This is a college paper. Randy Angel wrote a college paper in 1991, and we have a copy of this at the Historical Society. I have a copy of it. I'm sure Richard has one in his files. And Randy wrote about his family as a college program. He wrote about the McDaniels of McDaniel Road in good depth about how they got here and what brought them to Woodstock in the 1800s. And it's all recorded there in a college term paper. And I saw Randy a few weeks ago. He was at the flea market, and I said, "Are you still doing local history?" And he said, "No," he stopped. And I'm like, "Oh, that's too bad, because you really did a great job, and I bet you have a lot more to offer." But someone else in the family has picked up the standard bearing of researching the family. But I encourage anyone who wants to take a 20 minutes a day and sit down and write your recollections. It doesn't matter what you put them in. Put them in a little, goofy notebook like this. Just start writing it out and put it down and get it out of your brain. And then it becomes a possibility of it having it preserved. And I can tell you a good example of why. I'm gonna tell a story. Kenny Peterson, our beloved undertaker and local historian and postcard collector and person that we miss for a lot of different reasons. Excuse me. Kenny was very good he knew everything about everybody that came through the funeral parlor. He knew everything about everybody in town. I always said, be nice to Ken Peterson, because he's going to have the last say, right? Because he's going to bury it. Well, we had a conversation one day, and he told me this long story about, I can't remember what the topic was, and I said, "Ken, what are you doing with all this information that you have? Where are your files, or where are you putting this down so that we can refer to it in the future?" And he said, "It's all right here." And guess where it still is? It's still up in his head. It's all gone. So, little notebook. You have a little recollection that you want to make sure it doesn't get lost. Just put it down. It doesn't have to be in a good sentence. It can just be a string of words. What do they call it? A thought stream, right? Just regurgitate it out of yourself and put it down. And then you go back and look at it. Maybe you want to type it on a Word document. And then maybe you want to put it in a binder or put it like this. And then it's saved.
That's very true. That's very
Get
true.
it out of here.
Yes.
Right.
And we're living in Woodstock. We're living on the planet in a fascinating time.
Yeah.
And I am hoping that more people will write something, will journal something, will put notes in a little tablet somewhere, because it's going to be remembered, hundreds.
You can talk it into your smartphone, for goodness sakes, right? You got your voice memo. So we learn from, I think we learn from the past. That's Richard Hefner did a book for the Historical Society a few years back. He titled it Women of the Catskills, and it was stories of struggle, sacrifice, and hope. But by putting these stories together, what Richard did was he preserved, in a book form, stories of women and how they succeeded. And it's people throughout the Catskills. It's not just related to Woodstock. So it has a broader appeal, if you will. But one of the women he featured from Woodstock was Marion Bullard, who was here in the 30s and 40s. She was an artist, but she was also an activist. And so part of her story is here in this particular book that he did. And I also wanted to mention Richard, our town historian's most recent book that he did. He actually launched this like the month before the pandemic hit, so it never really got to properly get the hubbub that it deserves. But he did this. It's called Woodstock's Infamous Murder Trial, Early Racial Injustice in Upstate New York. And this is also, I have it for sale at the flea market, and it's also available through the Historical Society, the Golden Notebook. You can buy it online. It's, it's available everywhere. But it's the true story of a white man from a prominent local family who was murdered in 1905, and the prime suspect was an African American man. And Richard did, which is what he loves to do, and I think he has a passion for research. He did research through newspaper articles and trial notes and different things, and put it into a narrative where you can easily follow the trial and see the journey that the African American man who was accused of murder, the journey that he had, and how a lawyer helped him get that resolved. So I won't tell you the whole story, but it's another way to learn about what do they say in Ireland? It's an actual fact, something that happened in Woodstock. Can you imagine that, an actual fact? Are there any other kind of facts?
Who knows? Well, so what about writing? Do you have any thoughts about writing? We've been talking about all these books and the research and the history, which is extremely important. But what happens when you sit down and you have a pen and you have a piece of paper, or you're at a smartphone, or you're, at your computer? Do you have any thoughts about writing?
Well, I think that we should not be afraid to write. Writing has to be cultivated when you're a child. You have to be able to be comfortable to make mistakes. You have to be able to make friends with the critical voice that tells you that this is stupid, and you have to say, no, it's not. Or maybe it is, but I'm going to do it anyway. There's two voices that you have to, give back to the critical voice. And I think if a person has something that they want to say, and writing is their medium, then I think it's good to just jump in and do it. And even if you do it just for yourself, and if you do it just for your private love of writing poetry or haiku, you don't have to, delve into all this depth of stuff that I've gotten involved in, but just for the joy of journal writing. And I think it's a natural way to relieve one's mind of topics that the mind wants to be free of. So I think it has a lot of different purposes, writing.
Well,
and it can be a solitary activity. You don't have to have a partner do it. You don't have to have somebody help you. You can just sit down and 3 minutes just.
I think it's good mental development as well. When you're writing, I know that there was a time several years ago when I heard people say, well, everybody's going to be illiterate now because nobody. Well, that's not true. With Facebook, we're all writing like crazy. We're not.
We're writing shorter sentences, though.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
It's different.
Yeah.
It's different, and Instagram and Reddit and all of the new things that are coming along. But we're definitely writing. And times, because they are speeding up, so many interesting things are happening. And they're just sort of sliding by if they're not observed.
Well, I think we have the opportunity in the world that you and we're all living in to be able to observe activities throughout the whole world and in outer space, if we can get to the right place to, visually see it via the medium that we're sitting in front of here. So, but there's always got to be somebody writing a script somewhere. There's somebody already on a teleprompter making sure you say the right things, though, right?
That's very true. That's very true. But, I think also that writing in itself is an adventure. When you look back at the first book that you wrote, if you were to write it again?
Oh, I definitely improve it. And if I get enough time, I'm gonna. I can guarantee you that.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And I also, you have a blog, don't you?
I have a blog that I don't attend to very much because I'm doing other things. But yeah, I have a blog. It's called View from My Kitchen Window -janine.blogspot.com. But yeah, it doesn't get the attention it deserves. But
What are some things that you write about,
on the blog or just in general?
that you blog about?
Ah, golly, I've blogged about, it could be spiritual things. That's the thing I put up most recently. But that's a year ago. I think I did write about the pandemic once, and I think that's the last episode that I put on there, I believe. So it depends. You got to be motivated. I got to have the essay. It's got to look really good. It's got to look good if it's going on a blog, right? But it has to be something that I want to make sure that it's left out there because it'll stay out there forever. So.
You know, I'm fine. Oh, we are down to just a couple of minutes. So I want to thank you so much for all of the goodies that you brought in to share.
You're welcome. Yeah, it was fun.
Do you have any kernels of advice for someone beginning to do some historical research? You said you started yours with genealogy.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the way to go if you're going to do history?
If you're going to do history of your family and local history, it doesn't hurt to have a working knowledge of that. But I think I would suggest if I was going to start researching something historically, I would make sure I knew what my topic was. I would know about the peripheral location of where I'm researching about, and be open to the information and thought streams that are going to fall in your lap while you're doing the research, because you suddenly then find yourself in a broader pool, if you will. You might start in a small puddle thinking that's where you're going to stay, but as you start your research, it's going to expand. So you have to be ready to gather more information than you're going to need, and then you got to pare it back down again to stick with your theme. I mean, that's basically what you do. But there's plenty. The libraries are a great place. Local historical societies, genealogy societies, county office building has an amazing amount of information locally. There's an Ulster County Historical Society, New York State Library. It's endless.
Janine, how can people reach you?
Well, I think the easiest thing to do is call me at 845-679-6744. That's probably the easiest way.
And if they have any questions, are you open to answering the questions?
Absolutely, yeah, or stop at the flea market.
Yes.
That's the easiest thing.
And if they have questions about the Historical Society?
I would say call the phone number 845-679-2256, and that's the phone number. We'll pick up the message and we'll get back to people.
I have to thank you for the information that you have shared. It is truly jewels.
Oh,
Truly
well.
jewels, and thank you
Well.
so very much.
Woodstock just keeps rolling on, so we're gonna roll on with it. You're very
I
welcome.
think so. Thank
You're very
you.
welcome.
And thank you so much for viewing our show this evening.